Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniela Milic, and I would like to welcome you to this panel discussion about nurturing our own mental health and well-being. I hope you enjoyed the little video that we just showed, just to kind of set the stage and welcome all of you here. We're going to be talking about nurturing mental health, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a background because, as you heard from the video, we are at the United Nations system celebrating a World Mental Health Month, and we're now in the week 3 of the month of October. For those of you who followed us in the last 2 weeks, we focused on, in the week 1, increasing awareness around healthy workplaces and implementation of the mental health strategy, which is aimed at improving mental health throughout the UN system. And last week, we looked at reducing stigma and discrimination related to mental health challenges and supporting and welcoming colleagues that experience or have experienced mental health condition. So this week, we are actually focusing on ourselves. That means you, that means me, that means any of us. UN colleagues and others from different areas, sharing perspectives and experiences with regards to mental health and well-being. So before, I'm going actually to introduce the panel in a moment, but also just to remind everybody that the World Mental Health was on 10th of October, but because of the importance of this subject, we thought that one day just somehow doesn't do it justice, particularly in these times. The World Mental Health Day comes at a time where our daily lives have changed considerably as a result of COVID-19. So we're adapting to working from home. We're having anxiety about the future, greater social isolation, just to name a few things. So the last few months, and I speak from personal experience as well, have been an emotional roller coaster with regards to just the unknown and the changes that the pandemic brought along. And health and well-being is on all of our minds. So what can we do to not only keep safe, but stay sane is the topic of today's discussion. So what we have planned for today is we have an amazing panel. I'm going to briefly introduce them. We have, let me start, who am I going to start with? We have Therese Fitzpatrick, who is the global lead for the UN Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy. So she's working on an interagency basis to make sure that the strategy that's been adopted is actually implemented. We have Mark Pollane, who is a president of the UN Field Staff Union, and that means he actually represents voices of some 6,000 staff of the United Nations who are dispersed throughout the field. And last and certainly not least, we have Mohammed, known as Sohail Ali, who is the regional stress counselor for Southern Africa, if I got that correctly. East and Southern Africa. So as you can see, we have three amazing panelists who come with a wealth of experience with this topic, also a lot of collective years of experience in the UN system and outside, and they're going to be bringing a different perspective to our discussion today. So before we go any further, I would like to just bring some housekeeping points for us. So I'm just going to ask everybody to keep mute unless you are speaking, so that our recording is actually good and we can share that for future reference. Feel free to use the chat. Feel free to comment, to ask questions as we go along. We'll try our best at the end to answer as many questions as we can get to, but also this conversation does not need to end when this session ends. We can continue to engage and provide any answers or clarifications that you may need. And we will sort of towards in the middle of the session, we will have a poll where we'll be using Slido. So I have helpers here, Lucia and Melissa, who will be assisting with that. But if you already want to get prepared for that, the Slido code is 20642, and we'll put that in the chat as well. So let me turn now to our panelists. I am going to start with Therese because Therese is usually in my seat asking other people to talk about mental health, but we thought, why not turn the tables around a little bit and put her on the other side. So Therese, would you please introduce yourself a little bit more than what I've just said and just tell us why do you think mental health is important, particularly in these current times?
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you for inviting me to be on your panel. It does feel quite weird to be on this side. But so for those who I haven't met, my name's Therese Fitzpatrick, as Daniela said. So I'm the global lead for the UN System Workplace Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy. So working with all of the different UN agencies with an implementation board that has representatives across the UN agencies and with all of the key interdisciplinary groups from counsellors, doctors, staff unions, the Ombudsman's Office, HR. So it's an amazing opportunity to really show that mental health is everybody's business and we can all be playing a role. And it's important that we have lots of different perspectives coming in when we're talking about mental health and wellbeing. So I'm one of the ones with not as many years UN experience behind me, but I've worked, I started last year and I've worked with a lot of agencies, organisations outside the UN to implement workplace mental health and wellbeing strategy. So it's a really interesting time to be talking about mental health and wellbeing within the UN and globally, obviously. And what's been really exciting for me to see over the last 12 months is how the conversation has progressed. I feel like we're more able to have discussions around mental health and wellbeing. We understand that many of our personnel will experience mental health problems and moving towards how we're able to assist them. We still have a long way to go. So certainly not saying we've done it. We know that in some ways there's the silver lining a little bit around the current situation is it has accelerated the conversation. People are really aware of mental health and wellbeing. I think and as we'll talk about today, we've all had to take steps to look after our own mental health and wellbeing. Nobody is immune at this time. So it's really brought us to the forefront for everybody. And so really looking forward to the conversation today. And as we have these conversations, I think it really highlights where we need to go from here as well. So to start to prioritise, where are the gaps? What can we do? How can we make sure both we're looking at the UN system, and that's why the first week we really focused on healthy workplaces. So what can we do at an organisational level? What can we do to support staff? But then also how can we make sure that we all within the UN system have the tools we need to take steps to look after our own mental health and wellbeing. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today and certainly looking forward to hearing from my fellow panellists, as I'm sure they're going to have a lot of ideas around what we can do, and I'm always taking notes. And this week, as we've had the other session, I think I've taken away a few things from each of them about what I can implement, both within my life as well as within my working life as well. So those are the main things about me. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Therese. Thank you very much. And it's very interesting that the concept of we continue to be learning. I mean, we're not here to just sort of give any kind of prescription, so to speak, because as this has got us to look within and search and continue to find answers collectively. So Mark, since you're right under Therese, why don't I turn to you now to just briefly introduce yourself and give us your perspective.
Sure, thank you, Daniela. Well, my name is Mark Verleen, as said. I have been working with the UN since 1992. I started when I was like 12 years old, I believe. And mental health, I mean, yes, you rightfully say I am currently the president of the Field Staff Union, which is the second time I'm doing this in my career in the UN. Mental health has always been, mental health has become something that I became myself more interested in after going through a bout of depression myself a number of years ago. And it's one of the things that's always been very clear for me, that it's been overlooked for our staff in the field, very much so. Personally, I'm very happy to see that the UN is now putting so much emphasis on this. And it's for that reason that I'm fully on board in promoting this and trying to help push real support for our staff in the field out there, particularly now with the whole COVID thing. Our folks out there in some very difficult circumstances already have to deal with a lot of influences that affect their health overall and also their mental health. So COVID has only added on top of that lots of uncertainty about their families back home, unable to travel home. Some folks getting stuck on the way home. Some folks getting stuck at home. It's created a lot of situations, which has been bearing out from some of the results from our survey that we've been doing, trying to keep a tab on our staff's well-being, where more than half of respondents are from about 2,000 staff that responded to our latest survey that are saying that they are that there is a lot of worry and some extremely worried about the whole COVID situation and the personal effect that it has on them. So it's with that reason that I'm here. I'm certainly no expert on mental health. I do believe I am mentally reasonably healthy myself and hope to be able to share some insights that might help some other folks stay well. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
You're on mute, Daniela.
Daniela.
This happens at least once every session, so at least we got that out of the way and it will not happen again. But thank you, Mark. I was just saying thank you for giving a very broad and global perspective of the issue, particularly of the voices of the people in the field. And it's often not easy to reach out far and wide. And of course, you see our backgrounds, and we've gone out there to social media, we've gone out to yammers and Twitters and ways to just get the message out. But when we speak about the field, and I'm delighted that we have Sohail here with us, because we actually have put a lot of investment in terms of getting more counseling and more support out there. But the best person to talk to us about that is Sohail. So I'm going to turn over to you to give us your perspective as we go on.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Daniela. And as Daniela said, I'm Sohail. I'm the UNDSS Critical Incident Stress Management Unit, Regional Stress Counselor for East and Southern Africa. But I'm also a dad, a husband, a trainer, a counselor. So we all have multiple identities, and that also leads to multiple responsibilities that we have as personnel. And for us, I mean, mental health, it's often an unrecognized burden because it's not so visible to other people. And so what happens is people usually don't support, when they don't know. And the reality is that, there was a study from the WHO a few years back called the Global Burden of Disease. And they, mental health disorders are in the top 10 causes of disabilities, in the world. And in a few years, they'll be among the top 3. So, and even our personnel, the UN personnel, especially as Mark mentioned, the field personnel, the national personnel, they operate in some of the most difficult areas in the world. And they continue to do that. And on top of the hazardous conditions, the hardship environments, the civil wars, the humanitarian crisis, the displacements of people. In the middle of all that, then you had COVID. So it added on to all the factors that are stretching the resilience of our personnel in the field. And that definitely has had an impact. And we see, globally, in the population, 1 in 6 people in the world, that's about 1 billion out of 6 billion, suffer from some sort of mental health or substance abuse problems. They're struggling with them. And the ratio is a little higher among UN personnel because of all the factors that stretch our resilience and test it. And it's being tested even now. Even with the pandemic, they're also dealing with everything else that's going on and trying to help out. And we often say that our personnel have a double burden. On one hand, they're humanitarian workers, so they're out there to help other people. But on the other hand, they're vulnerable themselves as well. And so that double burden on our personnel has a mental health toll as well. And as Therese said, we try to support as much as we can, but definitely there's more that can be done. So it's this hidden burden that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sohail. And I really like this notion of double burden, because oftentimes we may think of ourselves as like we need to take care of others, but how do we collectively learn to put our mask on first is the question, which oftentimes we don't necessarily think, or maybe we're not conditioned that way. Maybe we're conditioned to be the solution providers rather than necessarily think of ourselves. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's a nice leading us to the next question I have for you is, we're talking about these factors that stretch our resilience, to borrow from Sohail. What do you, my question for you now, I think I'm going to start with Therese again. What do you see as the key things that are affecting people's mental health and well-being? And as you're thinking of your answer, I also wanted to invite our audience to participate and join in and put in the chat sort of what are some of these stressors or some of these factors that are affecting you from multiple roles or multiple hats that many of you out there carry on. Go ahead, Therese.
Thank you, Daniela. And obviously this is a really big question, and I could probably spend the next hour talking about it. But I think, as I said earlier, everybody has had to consider their own health and well-being at the moment. So I think it's really important that we all make sure that this is we understand that this is relevant for all of us. But we also know, and I'm sure Mark has seen it and Sohail has seen, there's particular things that are creating increased risk at the moment. And obviously a lot of that is around uncertainty for the future, uncertainty around what will happen, and people really wanting, we don't deal well with uncertainty as human beings. So we like to know the answers, and you can see that in so many of the questions that people get asked. When can we go back to work? When is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? And we know nobody can answer a lot of these questions at this point. So finding ways that they can manage that uncertainty. What can we be sure of and what aren't we sure of? So how can we work through that? We also know that particular groups might be more at risk. So younger people, we certainly found, we did a health and wellbeing survey with 13 UN organisations, and one of the things that really stood out with that was people who were younger, in all of the younger age groups below 45, were really struggling with their health and wellbeing at the moment. And obviously there's a whole range of reasons why that is the case. And so we need to be thinking about how can we support our younger colleagues at this time. Another thing, and I know Mark will probably speak about this as well, is around, for UN staff, it is that separation and friends. And it is one of the things that we all need to deal with at this time. I know for myself, not knowing that it's so much harder for me to get home to family and friends if I need to is really challenging. So it is one of the things we often, again, it's not something we can contain and control, but thinking about what can we do, how can we make sure we're supporting each other, how can we make sure we're staying connected with our family and friends and have the support we need in our duty station. And I think this is where colleagues do become really much more important at this time. So it is often that we may be needing to turn to our colleagues in a way that we didn't need to previously. The other thing, and the other one I will say, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues. As I said, I feel like I could talk about this the whole session, but I'm really mindful that people who were already experiencing a mental health condition are also more at risk at this time. So it's really important that those people are making sure they get the treatment that they need, to make sure they're reaching out for help, to be implementing the strategies that they need. And we've got information on the coronavirus wellbeing site around that. So really wanting to acknowledge people who are and were already experiencing a mental health condition, to be making sure you're getting the help you need at this point. So I will pause there to make sure I leave a few things for my colleagues to speak about.
Thank you for that, Therese, and certainly a lot of food for thought. And I was promising audience that they'll have a chance to tell us also what's keeping them awake at night, what's stressing them. So Melissa has kindly put together a Slido poll. So maybe we can just pause for 30 seconds and give Mark a chance to think about what he's going to say. And colleagues, you see here, you can do this fancy QR code to open on your phone, or you can go on the website and type in the slido.com number 20642. We're going to give it about 20 seconds to get some input from the audience. And of course, we'll share this when it's done. See, we're already seeing isolation. We're seeing lack of meaningful collections all around that team. Of course, having family members in high-risk areas is certainly an important point. Fear infecting others. We also have that. Uncertainty, lack of work-life balance. Of course, there's increased workloads, vaccines, a lot of issues. Of course, the current situation is bringing up loneliness. Back-to-back meetings. I think this is also even some of our tools that are meant to remove or release stress actually happen to be on Teams or meetings. So it's also an interesting point. Wow, a lot of wealth of information we're getting. Thank you everybody for sharing, and it seems like we're converging around similar themes here. Even though our audience today is quite diverse geographically. We have already, I think at one point we were 160 people in the room. It tells you that the message from the earlier is that we're all in it together one way or another. So that's definitely there. I think we're going to stop now and go to Mark so he can continue on, but we'll definitely save everything that you've put here and kind of try to synthesize it afterwards. So thank you everybody, and Mark, over to you.
Just a point of clarification, we're talking about the second question, yeah?
Yes, sort of what do you see are things that you see affecting people's mental health and well-being?
Interestingly, I saw a comment in the chat where someone said that lack of understanding from managers, and I do think this is something that desperately needs to be addressed. I think many managers are probably not well equipped or equipped enough to recognize folks that need help. There are signs to look for, and I think many of us have not been trained adequately for that, perhaps. There is also, I think, one of the issues that is my experience personally in the field, and certainly in peacekeeping, there is a large military or uniformed component in the missions. That translates very often in a culture within a mission environment that is sort of military, if you like. And this unfortunately also very often brings with it these attitudes of not wanting to show weakness or perceived weakness by speaking out when you are not well or you do not feel well or things like that. And the whole sort of topic around mental health, I think, for many years in the field, where that culture sort of exists of you need to man up, and if you have a problem, go to the pub and have a drink, or sit with your mates and have a drink and it'll go away. These things are really not helpful, I think, and very often many issues that people face are not identified, or people do not wish to be seen as weak or whatever it is, and lots of things stay buried within the person, and then ultimately very often results in a real crisis further down the road when it's not actually addressed. So I think these are some of the things that I think what we're doing now with the whole strategy and this work really helps to open this up, and COVID very much has actually helped to expose this in many ways. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but in a way, we should always be thankful that we have this pandemic, because it really opened people's eyes and minds to the fact that, there is very often an issue, and we're not really addressing it head on. So I think this is one of the key areas that we need to focus on: awareness, make people feel comfortable, and give them areas and opportunities and ways to share their problems, if they have, with someone they can trust. And I think that's also one of the areas where we as staff representatives can play a role, and I think we should play a role. And it's also an area where we as staff reps will require training and stuff like that, to make sure that we are adequately equipped as well to offer support and to deal with people that have. Someone's playing nice music. That's it for me, Daniela.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for, and certainly out there becoming a champion of mental health is something that I think we all can take on board, and whether we are in the counseling profession or not, I think being that catalyst for conversation is certainly doesn't belong exclusively to one group of professionals or the other. I think we are in our own daily lives confronted with these situations, whether we are nurturing our family members or colleagues or things like that. I think what I believe mental health needs is just more open conversations. And there's also this cultural element of this, that in some cultures it's more easier to talk about certain things, in some not. So finding that right balance and creating a safe space where, as one colleague says to me from time to time, says, do you want to just be quiet for a little while together? And we have these sessions where we just sit quietly and really do nothing, but we actually do a lot. So thank you for reminding us of sometimes also this gratitude, even being awkwardly but grateful to COVID for bringing the opportunities for us to do that. So cultivating that side of our soul is also very, very good. And on that note, I'm going to turn to Sohail for him to give us his perspective on, particularly on this double burden, that maybe you want to elaborate a bit about that, and what do you see as some of the stressors from your perspective? And you want to unmute, Sohail.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes, go ahead.
Okay, yes, so that was my turn to be muted when I'm speaking. Hopefully that happens once. Okay, well, about the double burden, yes, it is, you see it in general as well. The dilemma of being humanitarian workers there to serve others, and also being vulnerable. And then you see the changes in the challenges for specific groups. Like for national staff in the field, who form the bulk of our workforce. Besides being humanitarian relief workers, they are also part of the host population. So they are family members, they're elderly, they're impacted, they're struggling with the same impact of the pandemic that's happening on the community is also affecting them. So for them, that creates more challenges. For the international staff who are there, without their families, especially non-family duty stations, the isolation adds to the fact they need to take care of themselves, versus they need to make sure that, they continue their humanitarian relief work, but they're out of their usual support system. And they're separated from that usual support system now. I mean, imagine in places where there was a 4-week R&R cycle, and now people may not have been able to meet their family members for over 6 months. And so that double burden multiplies. And we've seen, I mean, from the perspective of the stress counselors, we've seen two developments over the last 1 year. I remember when Therese, I, and yourself, we got together earlier this year in the first half, there was a different dynamic to the pandemic at that time, and the dynamics have changed. If you recall, there was the initial, at the start of the year, there was a period of denial where, there was a minimization of the pandemic, which was followed by a feeling of anxiety and a general public response, because there was uncertainty about that as it developed, and there was anxiety of how it would evolve. what I have seen now, and what many of my colleagues have seen now, is that it has transitioned to sort of a fatigue now. We've been in this for 9-10 months. Initially, everybody thought it was a sprint. Now we find out it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. In a sprint, you can use your adrenaline and reach the finish line. In a marathon, you need to pace yourself and you need to take care of yourself so that you're able to run the stretch. So that feeling of fatigue is quite evident now among the personnel, among their family members around the globe, especially in field locations, because they've been on vigilance, they've been anxious, they've been concerned for such a long time now that it can also cause complacency. So initially you had the fear, now you have the fatigue. Initially there was uncertainty, now there is some degree of complacency. There's a feeling that this isn't going anywhere soon. So it's going to be a new way of living and working, and the impact will be much longer. So those dynamics have changed, and so people's reactions have changed. The requirements have changed as well for response. The other phenomena that has been visible over the last 10, 11 months now is the phenomena, it's been studied for a few years now, but it's becoming more evident in the pandemic. It's called stress proliferation, where one major stressor actually gives rise to more and more secondary stressors. And we've seen that with the pandemic. Primarily, it's a health issue, but then it gives rise to secondary stressors in terms of domestic dispute, violence, the socioeconomic impact on communities, the impact on the mental health of people who've been under lockdown for so long, the isolation that comes after that. So a lot of secondary stressors that are arising from the primary stressor. And this stress proliferation is becoming a burden. And I remember somebody saying, everybody has to carry their cross, and the cross gets heavier as you drag it along. So there's that feeling that, it's becoming bigger and bigger, and the impact is getting wider and wider. And the mental health impacts of the pandemic and its secondary stressors are going to be visible for much longer than the pandemic itself, and much wider. So those are the two main changes in the dynamics that we've seen over the last 10 months. The changes in people's reactions from then to now, and also the changes in the mushrooming, if you will, of the stress proliferation as it impacts more and more of our lives. So I know we'll be talking about what we are doing to handle that, so I'll leave that to a later question. But thank you, over from my side.
Thank you very much, Sohail. And I really like this concept of, I think you put a definition of something that I've been grappling around, is mushrooming. It's like you feel that one thing leads to another, you're worried and then you can't sleep, and then you can't sleep, and then you worry for not sleeping, and you're kind of having this roller coaster that sometimes just can be very, very overwhelming, and this stress proliferation that you rightfully described. And I think one of the participants in the chat added to that another dimension of working across different time zones. So you may be actually permitted to go work from your home country, let's say, so you're closer with your family, but then you're waking up at all odd hours of the night, or to be able to keep up your job. So yes, it's meant to help you on one end, but oftentimes some of these solutions that we have are also creating difficulties for us. So thank you very much for really putting a nice highlight on that, so we kind of have a better understanding what we're grappling with. So I think it will be only natural now to continue to talk about what can we do, and having the three of you here, I think we could benefit from just learning what do you do to look after your own mental health and well-being, especially given that you are responsible in many ways for well-being and mental health of others. But I would be curious to know, what do you do for your own mental health? So I think I want to mix it up a little bit. Let me start with Mark for this one.
Thanks, Daniela. It's an interesting question, and so sort of to follow on what Mohammed was saying earlier, one of the key things that I learned to handle your own stress, because stress is such a element that causes so many of the both mental and physical health issues. Um, One thing I learned is, learning about your own body and understanding and listening to your own body, but also understanding some of the biochemical things that happen in the body related to stress. The hormonal changes and things that have a real impact on your health. And this is very applicable to our folks in the field. I think many people know how adrenaline and being in a constant fight or flight state causes adrenal fatigue, and adrenal fatigue is a major contributor to eventually ending up in a depression and subsequently can cause further problems. And a lot of people underestimate that, so it's and don't recognize it. Many people don't recognize the fact that they are constantly in a heightened awareness, if you will, for danger, and that causes this adrenal fatigue. I learned a lot about these things myself, and that has helped me to deal with this and recognize these things when you're in such a state. Once you realize and recognize that, then there are various ways and means to deal with this stress. We all know the breath work. For me, breath work is something I do quite regularly. Simply deep breathing and conscious breathing is something that's very effective, and it's very much aligned with meditation practices, which I highly recommend. It's something I do quite regularly. And then there's the physical aspect. Sports, as everyone knows, is very good to deal with the hormonal balance in the body as well. There are so many things, and I wanted to point out, because I've actually had contact with the UN Foundation some times ago. They are sponsoring this Peace on Purpose group, and this Peace on Purpose group has through UN Innovation and UN Foundation and Lululemon, they offer this app, Insight Timer it's called, and I think it's a very good app for helping you with meditation and things like that. It's something I use regularly. And they give you this app and premium access for free, so it's really something I would highly recommend. I've posted it in our Yammer groups quite a few times, I believe. But yeah, these are some of the things I believe are crucially important, is to get in tune with your own body and understand your body's language to yourself. I follow Sadhguru. I don't know how many people know about Sadhguru, but he talks about this inner engineering, which is so crucial. When you understand how your inner body actually functions and works, you begin to understand how to respond to it and make sure that your mind is well as part of the body. I'll leave it at that and then give the others a chance to talk as well. Thanks, Daniela.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I certainly benefited from that app. I'm going to kindly ask you, or we're going to do it a little later, put it in the chat, because this is also the benefit of talking to colleagues, because I've learned about that wonderful tool that actually helps me as well. And thank you, Mark, for bringing up this kind of physical mental balance, both like, the sports, and then benefit of even just simple thing is breathing. It's always when they tell you just breathe. We always take that for granted just because it comes naturally, but it also sort of stops at times when we feel overwhelmed. So that's a very interesting concept. And Sadhguru is certainly a wealth of resource that we can also drop that in the chat as well for others to consider. So Hale, I'm going to turn back to you to continue. Tell us a little bit about what do you do to look after your own mental health and well-being.
Okay. Let's see. Am I muted or unmuted?
No, you're good. You did it once, and your quota is used up now.
Okay. Well, for one thing, I should have bought a more comfortable chair. I've realized now. Initially, we were thinking it's for a couple of months. So I just bought an office chair, and now I realize I should have bought a more comfortable one, considering that we've been working like this for a year, and we'll probably be working like this for a longer period. So yes, my tip, if you're buying a chair, buy a more comfortable office seat, because we're going to be working like this for a while. What do I do to take care of myself? Well, you know what I said about the sprint versus the marathon. Uh, in a marathon, you need to pace yourself. You need to focus on the end game. So what I've learned, and I'm still struggling it, and my kids tell me, don't sweat the small stuff. Uh, if there are little things that you can let go of that would that make that make me angry or frustrated, for example, I ask myself, is this really a big deal in the long term? So my daughter tells me, don't sweat the small stuff. Focus on the big things that are important. And so if there are little things that irritate you in this time, I try to let go of them, because they're much bigger challenges to focus on. The second thing that I've noticed is that everybody around us is exhausted like us, or sometimes even more than us. So when I get a harsh email or a rude remark, or I try to remind myself to take a step back and say, maybe the person is tired. Maybe the person is worried about something. So let me give him or her the benefit of the doubt before I react. And we're all tired. We're all stressed. So that helps me avoid some increased stress by taking a step back and giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. The third thing that I try to do is, when we were in the office, we had these real boundaries. So you were in the office, you would shut down your computer and go back home. So there was a boundary between home and work, which isn't there. Now I've had to recreate these psychological boundaries. So I have a joke with my kids. I'm telling them in the morning, okay, dad is going to the office, which is practically a desk in the corner of the room. But it's a psychological thing. And in the evening, when I step out of the desk, my kids say, oh, so daddy's back from the office. So we've sort of recreated these psychological boundaries to get some semblance of a structure in life. And I try to set up new routines. Predictability helps us feel in control. So even if some things are not predictable, like whether next week the parks will be open or not, with the second wave coming. So whether the things that aren't predictable, let's not sweat them. But the things that we can set up a routine about, I try to set it up. One of the major challenges that people were talking to me about, and I'm facing also, is keeping track of your diet and your exercise. So I use an app called Lose It, which helps you track both what you're eating and how much you're exercising in the same app. So it's a way of keeping track on my body as well as my activity. And so there are lots of things we've all been trying to do, but these are some of the few things that I've been trying myself. The other thing that's been very helpful is the effort to help others. Very often when you feel out of control yourself, you can regain some control if you're helping somebody else. And that gives you a feeling that, you're helping out. And at the household level, you do that with your neighbors, you do that with friends who may need help. At the organizational level, we've been trying to expand the resources available for personnel around the world by increasing the number of counselors in the field, by increasing the programs with Cigna that Therese has been spearheading, our colleagues in the agencies, so the staff counselors, in the agencies and the peacekeeping missions. So we've been trying to increase the resources at the organizational level, but that has an impact because when you feel you're being able to help others, it helps you deal with your own stress as well. So I just wanted to point that out in that sense. So I'll stop here. these were some of the things that we've been trying. I've been trying to do to reconfigure my compass.
Thank you very, very much, Sohail, and thank you for taking us from something so practical as like getting a chair, and I think a couple of colleagues in the chat commented also computer or bigger screen, to onwards to just giving space and being more kinder to one another in many ways. And also thank you for the app. I think we'll also share that as well. That one I didn't know, but I'm eager to always add more tools to my toolkit. So thank you for that. Therese, I'm going to turn over to you, and I'm also mindful of time. But go ahead, Therese. Tell us your 3 things or a few things that you do.
I will try and be fast. So firstly, I think, obviously echoing what everybody else has said, for me, it's about, I think I spent the early time thinking it was going to be really short. So decided I could just let my health and wellbeing go until it was all over. Soon became clear that was not really going to work. And so I started to think about what was really important. The first thing I did was go back to personal training, even if it was online. So I had 2 set times that I needed to undertake physical activity every week. The other thing I did was made sure, so I made those appointments at 5:30. So I also had 2 days during the week that I absolutely had to finish at 5:30, and I stuck to that, and I pushed back if there was meetings that had to come in at that time. Said, sorry, that's time for me. So doing that. The other, as it shifted over time, I notice when there's things where things have shifted for me. So my current goal, as I realised that I was slacking off around this, is I actually now have a rule that I have to leave the apartment every day, even if that ends up being a walk around the block. But at the end of the day, when I go, oh, I'm so tired, I just want to sit down for a bit, I've been sitting down all day. I don't need to sit down any longer. And I do really find that makes a difference. Even if I've got one more call to make, I pop my headphones in and walk and make that call, and that makes a significant difference for me. So lots of those different activities make a difference. The second thing I would say, I was thinking, the words I'm going to say is give myself a break. So I think we also need to be kind to ourselves. I've had some fairly challenging times over this period from a family perspective, and it's okay to be sad sometimes. And it's okay to just go, do you know what? I just need it to turn off and have a really good cry for a while. And that doesn't mean I'm not coping. It's actually something that I need to do for myself, to acknowledge, sometimes it is a lot, and we need to accept that for ourselves and allow ourselves to be sad, angry, any of those things, but keep an eye on that. So if you're not feeling okay, that is absolutely fine. Be kind to ourselves, step back, reach out for help when you do need that. Finally, going back to the work boundaries, and I talked about that a little bit, and I know we talk about managers, and certainly we're wanting to make sure we give managers the tools and skills they need to do this. And then I do think, and I know this isn't always easy and it depends on your situation, but to think through what are my needs and how can I make sure I play my role in communicating those to my manager, whether it is look, Tuesday, Thursday, personal training, 5:30, I won't be attending meetings, or these. So to be thinking about what my needs are and communicating those back to my organisation, to my team, so that they understand them. Because I think that also makes it easier for managers if they understand, look, this person's looking after kids, and actually from 10 to 12, it's really hard for them to do meetings. Can we find a way around that? So I think the third thing is to work out what we need and to do our best to empower our managers to allow us to do that. I'm not saying that will always work, and we've got a lot of work still to do in terms of training our managers and changing our culture. But if we can all take a step to put that boundary in, hopefully that can start to shift cultures as well. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Therese. And I think it's very important that what you mentioned is that the self-care is not luxury. Self-care is not something we, kind of do because we have nothing better to do, but it's actually our duty and our responsibility to ourselves. Otherwise, we're not doing service to anyone if we're not taking care of ourselves. So thank you very much for highlighting that. And I really think this thing of having your own space is very important. Even though we're saying sometimes we're isolated, we don't want to go back into that space. But I think setting these boundaries One tip I'll throw out there is one of the first things I did when the COVID started. I have this notepad which says to-do list, and I changed to-do to da, like da is my name, Daniela, but also to say to da rather than like, okay. And every day I must put one little thing that's me and me alone on that to-do list. And it was just a small change, but it did change the way I think and the way I prioritize myself so that I can better serve those that I need to work with. So I think all three of you kind of echo that importance of self-care as just an absolute necessity, not just something that is seen as, you know, I'm taking a time off. And I think managers, if we kind of work together to kind of sensitize them to that, taking some time off or working better in a different time zone, or you're more productive in the morning, as long as we focus on deliverables, we should be able to kind of get that message across. So I want to thank you all for kind of converging around that topic. And the last thing I wanted to ask, but I think I want to get the audience involved again, is just to ask you for, sort of in a concluding remarks, like what are your, very quickly, what are your like 3 tips or 3, I don't want to call them advices, that maybe sounds too big, but maybe just 3 tips you have for our audience today so they can take that away. And as you're thinking about what you're going to answer, I'm going to ask Melissa to do her magic. Oh, look, she's already there. And put a Slido. And I'm asking audience as well, sort of what are some of the things you want to share? I think we already shared a lot in the chat, but if there is something else you want to share, any resource, any tips, what do you do to look after your own mental health? Here's your chance. I will give it a few seconds. Make sure I laugh. Oh, that's, I love that. Yoga, okay. Biking to work. Oh, that's nice. Exercise, meditation, yoga. Crochet. Oh, that's nice too. Be kind to myself. Okay. Writing poems. Oh, excellent. I was going to do a little plug at the end that we actually, as a part of our mental health month, we also launched a poetry submission series. So we will definitely drop that in the chat for those of you out there writing poetry. Walk in nature on weekends. That's great. Sing. Oh, wow. Next session, we're definitely going to have some open mic session. Exercise. Taking long walks, sleep well. Wow, as you can see here, I think we're pretty much all touching upon both physical aspects of our body as well as like our mind and our soul and our heart. And I think this is very, very interesting. We'll definitely, okay, we're going to stop the poll now, but we'll definitely take a snapshot of this and share around because there's some things here that are new. All right, let me just take another quick tour de table for your top 3 or your 3 takeaways for our audience. Mark, I'm going to start with you.
3 things. One of the things I've learned to do is to try not to worry or stop worrying. It's not helpful and it will not change the eventual outcome. It is such a natural response for people to worry, but really trying not to do and becoming aware that the worry itself is only putting you in a state of inability to function very well, I think is a key thing for me. I'll leave it at that. We're almost out of time, so let's go over.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Sahil, you want to chime in?
Yes, I would say be flexible. If things work, that's fine. If they don't work and your mic is on mute or something goes wrong with the webcam, something goes wrong at home, I mean, if it's a little thing, just be flexible about it. It's not worth our stress at this time. So focus on the big things. Small things, when they work, fine. When they don't, it's okay. Let's just wing it, and let's look at the marathon, where we'll need to keep our strength for many months to come. So yes, and the second thing is, whatever helped you in the past, spiritualism, meditation, yoga, whatever helped in the past, try that again, and it should help. And the third thing is to stay connected. I made a resolution, like a New Year resolution, that each day I'm going to ask one person in my network about how they're doing. So at least one person per day. not for any work-related thing, but just ask them, how are you doing today? Is there anything I can do to help? So
that's wonderful. Thank you very much. And with everybody's permission, we're going to continue on at least 5 more minutes, if everybody's okay with that, because I would just really hate to cut this conversation short. Teresa, go right ahead.
Okay, so I think I probably said mine before. So do take the time to make a plan, commit to one thing. And I think that we can go, well, there's all these things, I should do all of those things, yoga, poetry, Commit to one thing, at least one thing, and get someone to check in. So I have somebody who checks in to determine whether I've left the apartment every day. So have a buddy around some of these things, and that increases the connection. As I said, be kind to ourselves, be kind to others, as we've heard, but also that be kind to ourselves. It is tough. It's tough for different people in different ways, and it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to need to reach out to our counsellors, and we've got a lot of information. We'll make sure people know where to go for help. It's okay to need help. It's not saying there is anything wrong with you. Do reach out if you're not okay, and do take the time to feel whatever you're feeling, and that is completely normal. The third thing, I'm going to turn it back to the strategy. So, if there are things that you feel the UN can be doing to help you to look after your own mental health, and obviously we need to be doing things to look at our workplace culture and all of those things, and we'd be looking at those. But if you've got thoughts about what the UN can be doing, let us know. Email mhs@un.org. We'll put that in the chat, or reach out through whether it's your staff federation, whether it's your local counselling officer, wherever your point of connection is. The UN is committed. From the top down, really aware that this is tough, really wanting to know what can we do. And there's not one simple answer. And the UN as a workplace can't fix the problems that are going on in the world. But if you've got ideas, thoughts, if there's gaps, do reach out. Let us know. We don't have all the answers, and we want to hear from people on the ground about what is needed, so we can do our best. So do let us know.
Thank you very much. And I was looking through questions in the chat, and one question that came is sort of if anybody has any suggestions for those who are carrying the double burden of their suppressed traumas and pandemic of COVID-19. Anybody wants to maybe give us some advice on that?
Yes. Maybe
Sahil, I'm looking at you. Go right ahead.
Yes, that's a very real, it's a very real risk. The element of re-traumatization, of past traumas, of past problems being rekindled by the current stress, it's a very real issue. It is happening. I would say, please, the UN is trying a lot to have support resources for you in as many locations as possible. So depending on the country where you are, please find out from the even DSS office there, from the medical clinic over there, from your agency HR person over there, from the peer helpers that you have over there, that who is the counselor who is available in the country, or who is the counselor who can be contacted if there's nobody available in your location. So the UN is investing a lot of resources in increasing the field presence of support, because we recognize the need. But you need to connect with the resource people there so that they can help out. And it's okay to ask for help. I have no shame in saying, I'm a stress counselor myself, but I often need help. So it's okay to ask for help. There are people there to help in your location, or they can connect you to somebody who can help you. But it's important to reach out to them and to confidentially ask for help. Your confidentiality will be protected, but please access the help that the UN is trying to provide in all the field locations.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And certainly it's okay to not to be okay all the time. I think this is really a message that we are hearing more and more. And it's probably one of the most courageous things we can do is ask for help. It's because we take that courage to realize that we can leverage our networks. And I certainly am benefiting from this session and just the chat and the amount of sharing and the amount of resources that already exist that we may be aware or not be aware. But keeping it simple, I think it's an important message that we heard from Therese, keeping it mindful, being grateful for things we have, although it is difficult. I think one person put in the chat, it's hard to find humor in common things these days. And I think it's okay also sometimes to cry and to laugh, depending whatever our being is telling us to do. So I just want to really, really thank you very much. I'm sorry that we don't have more time, but I think it generated a lot of discussion. I think I see more comments than questions in the chat. But maybe before we close, and maybe I can ask Therese this last question, like what do we do with managers, and what do we do, like one person asked, like what do we do when we see abuse of mental health? Or is there any tip you can give on that front? So when it does really get difficult, what can we do as HR practitioners or as colleagues or as counselors or as just anybody out there? What can we do?
So I guess there's not a very quick answer to that. What I would say for an individual who's experiencing that, to work out where you can go to ask for advice, and it is, talking to the counsellors, talking to a HR person, talking to the Ombudsman and Mediation Office, talking to your staff federation. So I think it's important to share what you're experiencing, to talk through that idea, because we can get also caught up in what's happening, and a fresh perspective is really important. Communication is key, and I know it's really easy to be saying, make sure you have a conversation and have open conversation. I know that that's not always possible, but do your best to communicate about what your concerns are with your manager and get the support to someone to help you with that. We know that change is going to take a long time, and so we are, there's training, we're working on training, we're working on making sure we give the support to managers. The other thing I think is also coming back to the message around the be kind to each other and all of those things. Remembering a lot of our managers are struggling as well. They didn't expect to suddenly be managing in this situation. And actually, I'm saying I can't put all managers in the same basket. So clearly there are some that need to change their behaviour, and it's not okay. And we need to be looking at that. We need to be pointing that out, and we need to be creating a culture of change. We also need to remember that our managers are people who are also struggling, who are also probably got their kids in the background screaming while they're trying to talk, or have all of these additional pressures on them. So if we can find a way within our teams to be more communicative, to have these conversations around mental health, then that can make a difference. And third, and as I said, we will be working towards ensuring that we have the tools that we can be supporting our managers with, so that they can learn those skills. So there's not one answer. There's different steps we can take, and it will depend on the situation. But if you are struggling, if you're seeing things, reach out to the many different places of support within the organisation. The more stories we hear, the more we can actually start to understand the issues and work out how we can address them. Also, if you've got ideas around that, again, email us at mhs@un.org. We can't help, obviously, with individual circumstances, but it will give us a sense of what the issues are out there. So thank you, everybody, for today.
Thank you very much. And it's good to know that we have people here from different agencies, but also there are some people who are managers and also additional stress counselors. They're on this call. So I hope this message actually penetrates through, and we're going to share the recordings. So this is one way. I'm certainly going to share the recording of this session with my managers and say, look, I've learned a lot today. Perhaps it'll be worth for you spending an hour listening to what others have to say. So these are just the ways we can, I think, influence the conversation and continue the conversation. I certainly want to thank our panelists, but I also really, really want to thank our audience. I don't know when was the last time I had such an engaging audience and so willing to share, which is another way of also that hopefully what we started is this momentum that Mental Health Day, which we turn into a Mental Health Month, hopefully will be an ongoing throughout the year conversation, so that we can actually take care of each other and really reach out to those who need us, and also focus on prevention as well, so that we can do, and we heard a lot of great tips from you. I just want to thank you once again for this mind-storming session, if I can call it that. And I think this is what I think mental health conversation needs, a bit more of looking into our mind and our heart, and sharing and being grateful for having colleagues like this that we can just leverage and and get tips and advice and even solutions when we get in those difficult situations as well. So thank you once again. The chat will be live, so those of you who want to continue to ask questions, I think I can commit ourselves that we will go through them all and really find you the answers as soon as we get around to that. So please continue to check in, and we'll put the recording in there and all the little tips that you heard and apps, we will also put it in. Please follow us on social media and stay happy and healthy. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, bye. Bye, Malawi.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Malawi.
Thank you. Bye.